Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Kirk Prine and I want to invite you to join us for our virtual calls around the archetype of the peaceful warrior. And in the last video, I talked about how the peaceful warrior among the Buddhists was kind of translated into a definition of one who's willing to know oneself and one who's willing to face one's fears. You know, in the world in which we currently exist, there's a lot to be concerned about. There's a lot to fear. And to be able to take and transform our fear into more love, more compassion, and more power is really the pathway of the peaceful warrior. When I was in grad school, I learned that there were about 3 to 10% of people who would live longer and better from any life-threatening disease or even life-threatening circumstance oftentimes. So that I wanted to know, what was it about the 3 to 10% that made them different? Was it, you know, their behavior, their attitudes? Was it about their energy? Was it how they presented themselves? Was it just good genetics? So, you know, asking good questions is always the pathway of the peaceful warrior, because it's willing to know yourself and willing to face your fears. And what I found was there were about 100 different characteristics of people living longer and better in their bodies. So, you know, in this world in which there's so much chaos and so much going on, most of us feel stress a lot of times, and our bodies are trying to tell us how to clear that stress, but also are trying to tell us what needs to be healed. And so the work that we'll do in the peaceful warrior is about that 3 to 10%. And so I'm going to give you the 5 characteristics from all of those 100 characteristics. I boiled them down into a pathway that's a little more simplistic for us to think about. So I want you to think as kind of your homework, whether you join us or not. And if you use this material, I'll just ask you to acknowledge its source, because it's not out there anyplace else. So putting all those 100 characteristics of people living longer and better together, I came up with asking for help. So the ability to ask for help, most of us are probably not really good at that. Even if we think we're good at it, asking for help means being vulnerable. And the peaceful warrior is about being vulnerable and being powerful. So being able to open up and receive all the good things while also being vulnerable to have those good things come to you. So asking for help, how are you with that? When you think about asking for help, when you think about paying your bills, you know, when you think about your relationships to other people, asking for help is a key variable in us living longer and better in these bodies, more vibrantly in our purpose. So asking for help, dealing with conflict heartfully. Key to dealing with conflict heartfully is actually being able to hold kind of those two polarities together. So I am powerful and I am compassionate. And in the peaceful warrior, really using the energetics of our bodies and learning about the energetics of our bodies so that we don't take on all the stuff that's being thrown at us, but we're able to kind of deflect it or integrate it so there's more harmony in it. So ask for help, dealing with conflict heartfully, setting and expanding boundaries. You know, in the world in which we're living, boundaries, social distancing is a boundary. You know, wearing a mask is a boundary. Saying that I love myself enough that I want to do this to take care of me and to take care of you. It's a great example of how all of this works. So setting and expanding boundaries and our relationships to each other, they all change. So the boundaries that you may have set with somebody a year ago may not be the boundaries for who you are and who the relationship is now. So we'll play with that as well, but we'll play with it by listening to our bodies. Along with that will be the whole idea of being your own authority. So really, and I'm kind of looking at, this is the manual that we'll be using together in our work together, but being your own authority, nobody knows the truth and what's true for you but you. So really taking your power back where it's been given away a lot of times, and oftentimes unconsciously, is part of the process of what we'll do in this yummy but interesting and fascinating check-in with our bodies. Who are we? How are we? How are we doing with asking for help? How are we dealing with conflict heartfully? How are we doing with dealing with conflict and setting boundaries? And how are we doing in the best part yet, which is living fully in your yes and no? I have my beloved who's on the other side of the camera, who is just a big old foodie. And oh my God, you know, he loves food. And so yes, is like full-bodied expression for him. And so in your yes, you create, and in your no, you create. But if you have a yes and no going on as a mixed message, then what are you creating? A mixed message that's going to come back to you. So in this work that we're going to do, and have you begin to think about these 5 characteristics and how you've worked on probably a lot of this stuff, but probably haven't worked on it a lot in and through your bodies. And we're going to teach you some of that. So hopefully that gives you some good information to chew on and play with and to think about as you might enter into this workshop with us. Thank you and namaste.